Allie is the creator of the YouTube channel 1 Month, 2 Cameras, where she puts out in-depth reviews of cameras and gear. But unlike most review channels, she does not look at the latest and greatest gear you can get your hands on. Instead, she looks back on cameras of the past, concentrating mostly on the 90s and 2000s, and demonstrates how you can still create beautiful images, often without breaking the bank. But cost isn't everything. In an era when digital photography was still young and companies had not yet nailed down a formula, you can find some quirky models with unique designs and features. Allie was kind enough to hop on a video call where we talked cameras, her career, and art. So please join me as we go and meet Allie from 1 Month, 2 Cameras. Alright, so today I'm interviewing Allie from 1 Month, 2 Cameras. It's her YouTube channel and Instagram page where she shares photography tips and stuff, and also reviews older digital cameras, and it's a really great channel if you want to check it out, but I'll kind of let her introduce herself a little bit more.
Oh, thanks. I am a camera nerd, so I like to just sort of cover off on all kinds of typically older gear. I mean, I've been dabbling in like what I consider very modern, which is like 2019. But that would be as far. ZF was in there too. So yes, but typically older cameras and film cameras and basically anything that will take a picture is right up my boat. So
yeah. So, what is it about like older cameras? Because most of the like gear channels and stuff you find, everything is the latest thing, and you got to spend handful of $1,000s to get it.
Well, that was actually part of it because I felt like I was very much in that cycle of like consuming so much YouTube and new gear and feeling like an anxiety about like never being able to keep up with all the new releases because every day there was something else and it's like, oh, that looks amazing. Oh, that looks amazing. And I had this sort of epiphany one day where I was just like, I can't keep just thinking it's going to be something bigger, better tomorrow. It was a literal like low grade anxiety. So I was like, I'm just going to try to look at what I have in my drawer. Sorry, if my kids barge in here, just let me know.
No, it's fine.
But I just wanted to look at the cameras that I had in my drawer and just like make do with what I had and really explore, how far I could reach with the gear that I had. And the funny thing was that then led me down the path of like looking into like more obscure older digicams and things that just had a bit of a different user experience as well as a different output and could be like very affordable because there's been a little bit of an escalation in interest. So like prices have gone up a bit, but it's still relatively affordable. But like when I started looking into this stuff, you could get cameras for $20. I mean, it was so dirt cheap and it was just so much fun. So I kind of went from that like really, really new cycle of cameras to like I don't even know what they're releasing anymore because I just love the old stuff now.
Yeah. Why specifically the old stuff do you love so much?
I do think that there's a couple of things. Like I think sensors have gotten so good in cameras now that like you can pretty much, they're all equal. Like they're all amazing. They're all excellent. Like basically anything after 2016 is on a relative playing field. Obviously there was massive like changes in the last 5 years on ISO and autofocus and all that, but everything is incredibly proficient. But I think with the older ones, there's just kind of an inherent quality that's just a little bit degraded and maybe just a little bit more full of character that, it's kind of been cleaned up. Like all these perfectionistic sort of advances have made things very sterile and very flexible. Like you can impose whatever vision you have onto the newer modern cameras. But the old cameras, you don't have a lot of flexibility. You got to kind of lean into the character that they bring to the table. So it's a little bit more of a dance.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that. I think it's really fun.
Yeah. No, there is something sort of about that limiting yourself in a sort of artistic way that brings out a lot more, I don't know. Sometimes, you know, if I'm sketching or something, I'm like, okay, I can only use this one marker or whatever. And I think that really brings out, you know, the different characteristics in it and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's you nailed it. Like, it's the limitation that I love. I love the challenge of it. I think it's not easy to take a good picture, whether it's a new camera or an old camera, but the experience of taking a picture now is so easy. Like, you click the shutter, it knows exactly where to focus and what the light looks like. And like with the older cameras, you kind of have to be a little bit more thoughtful because the autofocus might be really slow, or the metering might be really off, and you have to ensure that you're like spot metering and exposure compensating and all that stuff. So it's just a little bit more engagement because it brings more of yourself to the table to be able to use it, because they are antiquated.
Yeah.
Which is the fun part, the limitation.
Yeah. No, I think I found your channel and probably Snappiness at about the same time. And I was just, because I was kind of where you were at. I have a Canon EOS M6, the mirrorless first generation one.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's a fairly good camera, but, you know, there's already been another generation since, and then, you know, they moved on to the R mount or whatever. And it was kind of this thing of like, I'm not going to be able to keep up with it, you know? And it was kind of...
100%.
It was kind of cool to see that, you know, you could get these interesting shots and stuff through these older cameras. And so I think I bought it's a Sony Alpha 100, the first of those.
Yeah, 100%.
And then some like Lumix 2012 pocket camera. And I've had so much fun with those. Like, for one, the Sony feels more like you're using an actual camera than the mirrorless, which at a certain point kind of feel like you're using a phone.
Totally.
And then, like, the Pocket one, I took it on vacation with my girlfriend, and it's not the same as taking out your phone and taking a picture, and it feels like you're still there instead of...
That's a really good point. I mean, I have a real aversion to my phone. I think probably because I have to be on it for work, like at all hours, all the time. And I like, when I'm on vacation, if I can leave my phone in the hotel room, there's no greater joy in the world. And to be able to, like, to your point, you're still present. You have a camera. It's separating some part of the brain that like now has become very like amalgamated. You know, our tech is so sort of, we're becoming the tech robots. We're like so infused and ingrained, and it's great. Technology is fantastic. I have nothing against it. But I do like being able to sort of partition off that piece of my life and just like leave the phone, take the digicam.
Yeah, no, it is something kind of like taking control of your media. You know, like having that little bit of separation is nice.
Absolutely.
I've started like collecting DVDs and music again and stuff, and it's something about like not having to log into a streaming service, and like I actually own this, and it plays when I want it to, and I don't have to look at other notifications or, you know, it's
amazing.
It's something nice
it's
about.
So funny. I went on.
Go ahead.
I went on vacation with my girls, my two girls who are, you know, 8 or 7 and 4. And it was so funny because they are not used to like how I grew up, and I didn't bring anything with us. Like, I was like, we're going to watch TV if we want to watch TV, but it's going to be TV. And there are commercials, and you can't fast forward. And they could not figure out, like, what do you mean I can't fast forward through this? Or like, you know, just not everything is at my whim.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. That's how it was.
but I don't know why, but there is something nice about it, though. Like, just kind of like, I don't know. I guess it's under your control more than what the company wants you to watch. What, you know, not so much live TV.
There's
I guess, but
there's something I read, and I think that this is really, really true in like the modern era, where it's like, you know, technology was a tool and now it's kind of, it uses us versus us using it.
Yeah.
And I think it's just getting that relationship back in order. So I'm totally with you. I like to try to keep it a little bit more, I don't know, analog is the wrong word because it's still digital, but it's like digital that, you know, doesn't
that
feel like
you
it's,
control,
you know, doing everything.
You know?
Yeah.
You know what the file's doing, you know what the device is doing.
Exactly.
I mean, I was a marketing and production major in college, and you know, you take a couple marketing classes and you're just like, and it's all presented to you like, oh, this is wonderful, but it's like, oh, things are so great now, you know, Target knows when you're pregnant before you do and they can offer you this stuff. And I'm like, at a certain point, why do I need to know that?
I know. It is a pretty crazy world, man. I work in marketing, so I am very well familiar with how much is tracked and what is known, and it is a wild, wild world we live in.
Yeah. So I guess we'll get into sort of what you do and how you. I guess we'll go back to how you got started in cameras, and then we'll kind of move forward from there in your timeline.
Sure. Well, I very much grew up in a photographic family, so I was surrounded by cameras as a kid. My dad was a photographer. And it's so funny, like I totally attribute all of my sort of nerdiness to him, like in the best ways. Like I love engineering and like taking things apart and all that sort of stuff, and definitely comes down to sort of what he sort of imbued in me. And so there were cameras always around, and I have like great old photos from when I'm like 3 years old holding like an SX70 Polaroid camera. So it was definitely in the ethos of my childhood, and he built me a darkroom when I was 14 for my 14th birthday. And that was like the best gift ever. So I got really excited and inspired by like, you know, having a developer tray and seeing my pictures come to life. And it definitely bit me back then, but it was, you know, I think what a lot of kids are experiencing now. It's expensive. It's a big, expensive hobby. And I pretty quickly was like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to like keep paying for this. So I kind of retired the darkroom. And by 16, I left home. So I only had the darkroom for 2 years, and then I left home, went to college, and was not going to rebuild a darkroom in college. And I actually didn't study photography or anything related. I thought I was going to go into, you know, international relations or journalism or something like that. So the camera kind of got put away for a while, and then I ended up in New York and was working for, I always really had an interest in media. I started off, I mean, this sounds so cheesy. I started off as an actress, and as an actress, I got cast in a commercial, and then I, you know, was talking to the director, and I asked him, like, how do you do this? Like, I'm interested in directing, and long story short, I ended up working for him at his production company, and they were onboarding a relationship with PBS. And I sort of within a year ended up directing, producing, and writing this show on PBS. And it was so much fun. It was a travel show. So it's like also very aligned with my passions and loves. And so we would travel and shoot the show for like chips. Like we had zero budget. I mean, I was shoestring budget, total student filmmaking kind of ethos. And as a part of that, I really wanted to understand how to use the camera so I could like producer brain, like minimize my costs and potentially like have less crew with me and just DOP myself. And I felt that the best way to understand how a camera works in terms of film was to really get back to the stills camera, understand the exposure triangle, and then move over to film. I got into a Canon G9 Digicam, which was at the time very new, very exciting. I mean, I was like, oh my God, I'm spending, I think it was like $400. I had never spent $400 on a camera. I mean, that was just like oh my God, what am I doing? But this is like a long-term investment. And I totally got the bug, went down the rabbit hole, never even ported over to motion. Even though I do still produce, I kind of left the director of photography dreams behind and just went all in on photography because I liked that I could do it on my own and I didn't require, I mean, this was also before the days of even the Canon 5D Mark II that had video on it. Like you had to have like a real camera and a real crew to like make any kind of video at the time. It was a very less like creator economy. But I always loved both sides of the equation and just kind of really stuck with the cameras thing, got deep and started picking up this gear acquisition problem where I just like wanted all the cameras. Nothing's changed.
Yeah.
All these years later.
So, I get the TV show interests me. Maybe, you know, it doesn't seem like that, but like what was sort of the idea behind the show and everything?
It's gonna sound so corny. It was called Moment of Luxury, and we would travel the world. I mean, it was actually pretty fun. It was hosted by this interior designer out of Texas, as a matter of fact. He's in Houston, and he was kind of a big time interior designer, and he would essentially spend half the show going somewhere in the world and identifying design inspiration from, say, one of the ones that we shot was in Peru. And we went to the Royal Palace there and we looked at, you know, how they would, you know, sconce their walls and do all the various touches and all the various pieces of design inspiration that he would then take that and interpret it back, how to incorporate this design touch into your own home. So it was kind of a design travel show. And there would always be a little bit of, you know, history. I always tried to ground it in history. So like the Peru show, we started off in the ruins and then we took like, I always tried to make a narrative around like the course of history through design. So it was a really, really fun show. I loved doing it. It was a brief stint of my career because honestly, it was a lot of work. Like I did not sleep for a solid year. And it was always hard to get a paycheck. But I really enjoyed my time doing that.
Yeah.
And it was great boot camp. Big time boot camp.
Okay, so you kind of get, you know, your producer, director start. So what's your career move on to from there?
From there, it was funny because I knew I loved filmmaking. I knew I loved storytelling. And I knew I needed to pay my rent. And those things weren't fitting together very well at the time. So I essentially, I'm going to very much age myself here, but I think it was called careers.com or monster.com or one of those had just launched. I mean, we're talking like this was a long time ago. And the idea of finding employment on the internet was still kind of like radical. And I was like, oh, I'm going to sign up to this platform and see who's hiring. And I was just at that moment not sure what I wanted to do or like how to take the next move in my career. And I didn't really know that many people in New York. So I just signed up as an admin. Like I looked for admin jobs and I interviewed. The first 3 people to call me in was a law firm, an architectural firm, and an ad agency. And it just, by the fates, the ad agency hired me. And that's how I ended up in advertising. And I started in the production department of a very major advertising company in New York called BBDO. And it was, I assisted 8 producers there. And it was a very eye-opening, awesome experience. And I very quickly went into like, okay, this is going to work. I'm going to make this work. And suddenly like, budgets went from you have $13,000 per episode to this is it. My first job in 2008 or something. No, probably maybe 2008 because it was already maybe just before the recession, but 2007 maybe. My first job was $2.5 million. And I was just like, how do I even spend that money? Turns out in advertising, it goes very quickly. because that's where everybody gets their paychecks in order to go do those beautiful independent films. But I was floored, and I was like, okay, let's figure this out. We'll make this work.
Yeah.
And I've been in advertising pretty much ever since. I mean, yeah, solidly ever since.
So this, I'm guessing this is going to be like video production or...
Video production. At this point, I run a production department, so we touch everything. We call it like a 360 campaign.
Yeah.
So I'm working on everything from digital to activation to film to... and in a previous job, I ran a brand department at an actual, like, we call it like going brand side instead of agency side. So I've done both. I love them both. Pretty much anything to do with like, how do you tell a story? Like, count me in. I'm there.
Yeah. So, I guess you're still working, and I'm gonna guess it's a different agency since you switched coasts.
Yes, it's a different agency.
So, what brought you over to I lost my east and
To the
west.
West Coast?
Yeah, West Coast. I was gonna say right coast because of the way I'm sitting, and then
I mean, some would argue it is the right coast. I love New York. I'll never stop loving New York. I came out here because I wasn't expecting to. My husband and I were like diehard New Yorkers. I'd been there for 15 years. I was born there. I love New York. I truly, truly do. I will never stop being a New Yorker. All of my friends in LA are pretty much ex-New Yorkers. But I had my first child, and a year into being in New York with a kid was like, wait, my husband has 2 brothers here in LA. They all have 3 kids. My mom is in California. My dad was in Tahiti. I'm like, we have nobody on the East Coast. Like, what are we doing here? And it's so funny because we absolutely told each other we're never moving to LA. Never going to do it. And then one morning we both just looked at each other. We just woken up and we're like, are you thinking what I'm thinking? We just both knew. And within a month we had moved to LA.
so
kids will do that.
Yeah. There's a little bit more room out there, huh?
A little bit more room, definitely a lot more outdoor space, that's for sure.
Yeah. So, what point in this do you decide to like take on the YouTube channel, or was it like I'm gonna do YouTube, or was it like I'm gonna make a few videos and see what happens?
It's very I just kind of laugh because I don't actually know the answer to that. In 2017, I've always been completely obsessed with YouTube. Like, I was posting on YouTube when it launched, the year it launched. I actually have old videos on my personal channel from back in the day. And I kid you not, they were camera reviews, which is the funniest part. So I've obviously had this on my mind for a while, but I've always loved YouTube. And I think during the sort of the pandemic, when we were all stuck at home, I, like everybody else, I was just watching a lot of YouTube. And I just basically was like, these are my people. Like, I need to meet my people. And in addition to that, like, I have thoughts. I want to share my thoughts. Now, that was kind of like 2017-ish, actually. So before the pandemic. And I kind of started a really, really dumb channel where it wasn't camera specific, but of course the first 2 videos were about cameras, and then I didn't make any more videos. But my intention there was just I just like to go deep on stuff and get really nerdy. So it could be anything from like, museums to art to cameras to whatever. And it was just, the intention of it was just to go deep on anything that I was interested in, which is a pretty broad premise. I don't think it would have worked out, but I didn't get past my second video because I had a second child. And that was kind of it diverted a lot of energy, obviously, and time. And then I would say coming out of the pandemic, or like, I guess in 2 years ago or so, I was just like, I just need a hobby. Like, I need something to do. And I was feeling really stressed about my camera collection, which at the time was so minuscule compared to what it is now. But even that was too much for me in my head. And I was like, I got to narrow this down. So I did start the channel really with the intention of just documenting my cameras so that I could make a choice as to like what was going to stay and what was going to go. And I previously had thought I would like do a channel. This time I didn't think about doing a channel. It was just like a very informal document to myself, essentially. But then it turns out, yeah, other people are interested in these old wild cameras. And then I met James, who runs Snappiness, and we started talking, and I started meeting more and more people in the community. And I was like, oh, this is like what I was saying earlier. Like, cameras are just an excuse for me to have like a photo family. Like, that's what I was really after without even kind of realizing it. But it's been a blast the whole time.
Yeah. So, I guess, was there any point in which you were trying to figure out, like, how can I, like, boost my channel or anything like that? Was there any trying to advertise it or something?
It's funny because I think all of those thoughts probably cross every creator's mind, and it's really interesting to be, like, where I am now versus where I started, because I was shocked that anybody was going to watch a video that I made, because like I have very low production value. I don't have much time. So it's like very off the cuff. I'm not scripted. I'm not like, I'm just kind of speaking my mind and sharing my thoughts on a camera. So I really did not think that would have any traction whatsoever. And when it did have traction, of course, you're going, oh, wait, what? Like someone else is interested in this and wants to talk about this. And so I definitely thought about it, but I will say I am a marketer in some ways, but I am not a good marketer of my own work.
Yeah.
Nor frankly was I interested in marketing. I kind of got, it starts to feel like a real obligation. It becomes a second job, right? Like I have a job. So I didn't spend a lot of time trying to boost the channel or put a lot of energy behind it because I just frankly didn't have the ability to. I would love to do that, but I just don't have the time to do it. So kind of short answer is no, but I definitely was interested in it. Like I think it's very interesting, the metrics and all that sort of stuff. I just can't, I can't digest it. I can't consume my time with that. I think the success of my channel, it's still a very small channel, but I think, if I can credit anything, it's just to like having such an engaged community that shares with each other all this like fun camera stuff, you know? So I think there are people that I really admire who do a great job of promoting their channel and growing their channel and doing all this sort of YouTube things that like redirect you to your own videos and all that sort of stuff. Like there are a lot of tactics that I greatly admire, and I think people do such an awesome job of like seamlessly, and I recognize that that's not what my competency is, so I just let it go.
So I guess I'd kind of like to get into the more like camera technical sort of artistic side of it.
Let's go.
How do you find like your style of photography?
Oh boy. I would say like my style of photography is very captured moment. Like I try not to be overly precious about anything. I don't think of myself as like a formalist in any way. It's a very emotive sort of feeling based style, if I were to give it and color. Like I'm absolutely drawn to color. I love black and white. I absolutely adore it, but I like, given the choice, I'm always going to go for color. And the people like Christopher Anderson, who I just adore their work, they're always just going with this like crazy, almost over the top, abstract, saturated, like douse you in color, which brings like a level of sort of, I think, sensuality, if you will. And I don't mean that in a sort of like a touchy-feely way, but like in a like just in a core emotional way. That is what I aspire to, at least.
Yeah. So what was there With your own photography, you said, you know, it was kind of a motive, just capturing the moment sort of thing. Was there a time period where you were kind of experimenting with that, or is that just kind of how you've always taken photos?
You know, I think, so my true passion, what I wanted to be as a 25 and up person, I wanted to be a photojournalist. That was my sort of obsessive, like, goal. But there was no reality in that at all. Like, I am the first person in my family to have a stable job, and I'm very proud of that. So I was like, I am not going to go, like, wandering around the globe just trying to make ends meet, capturing the world's ills.
Bringing your kids along with you.
Even though I'm very drawn to that. Yeah, exactly. I am very drawn to that. Even to this day, like, I will go to protests and, like, just, like, show up at places where I know that there's going to be action, because, I mean, there's flooding here right now, and immediately I was like, told my husband, I'm like, I'm headed out to the Sepulveda Dam, which is like where they're holding all the water. And I'm like, I want to go document. He's like, are you out of your mind? Stop it. You're not going anywhere. You're like, you have to work today. So chill. So like, that's definitely my inclination, is to sort of, you know, go out and capture what I can sort of see, and witness. And documentary photographers are totally my icons, my heroes. You know, the people I would invite to dinner should, you know, I have my dream guest. But I basically took that interest and kind of just transported it into what I can do, which is just document my life. And that's the best that I can do. It's the closest to being a photojournalist that I ever will be. But I'm a photojournalist of my own story and my own world. And I think that that's completely the core of how I approach photography.
Yeah. So I'm kind of interested because you talked about, I don't know if it was your first channel or the first couple videos you did, where you wanted to, you know, just kind of talk about your interests, talk about different things that, you know, interested you. Have you ever thought about pursuing that again?
Well, yes and no. I mean, so I think actually, you know, I have been pretty consistent with the type of video I've been doing on my channel so far, and it's still going to be camera related, but I do think I'm going to be expanding that category, or at least the way that I approach it in 2024. So stay tuned. I think, yes, you'll start to see a little bit more of that.
Yeah. So go and subscribe to Allie's channel right now.
I have never asked anyone to subscribe, and
now to our ad break. Now to our ad break. Snappiness. It's a YouTube channel.
No, I definitely have a lot of interest, so I'm sure they will start laddering into the channel, and, you know, in their own ways.
Yeah. So, would you consider yourself sort of like with your interests? Is it like other technical things, or is it more geared towards art or subjects like that?
I think it's probably more geared towards art, and it's also just like why are things in the world the way they are? Like, I think there's just like, okay, I'll give you an example. I have a very weird. This is how my brain works. And who knows if anyone's going to find this interesting, but it is in the world of art, generally speaking. But I went to a museum the other day, and I was looking at all the paintings on the wall, and they run the gamut in terms of eras, you know, and styles. And I was like, you know what? I would like to photograph this gallery with like a large format camera, or something that sort of brings a dramatic point of view to this wall on a gallery, and take all the paintings out, because what I want to know is the story of the frames. The frames each had such a story. Like, what is that painting without the frame, and who chose the frame, and why is it that frame, and like, how does that frame inform the image? You know, like, there were all these different things.
Sorry, I lost you for a second. Last thing I heard is why did somebody choose that frame?
But yeah, no, I was just saying that I went to a museum, and I just thought, you know, I was fascinated by all the paintings. But what was more interesting to me was, why did they choose this like very ornate frame for this painting and then this very spare frame for this painting.
And
Because I think,
oh, there you are.
oh no.
Yeah, I was watching it's so scripted and so trash, but have you ever seen that Hardcore Pawn on like History Channel or one of those channels?
Yes, I totally have. I totally have.
And I just moved into a house. I don't have internet or anything, so I'm just watching, antenna TV.
I love it. I love it.
So I'm watching that, and somebody brings in these stolen paintings and all this stuff, and they bring in somebody to check them out and everything. And I was thinking that I was like, who chose the frames for this Picasso or something? And
yeah. And it's like, it says a lot about what's inside the frame. So I just think that that's a really interesting point. And I'm sure it's the curator or somebody, but who knows? I mean, some of these are like historical artifacts that may have had that frame for 100+ years. You're like, what?
Yeah.
What's the story with the frame?
Yeah.
So that's one of my interests is
and you got to think about thickness of it and everything can mess with that composition. So
Absolutely.
Who knows if they put trying to think of a famous painting, Hieronymus Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights. Let's decide they didn't put in that giant cabinet thing. Would we even care about it now?
Yeah, exactly.
But that is an interesting idea. And I may be weird too. It's altogether likely. This channel probably shows that because I have everything from like murders and, Russian military guys to artists and musicians and photographers. So,
well, that's why when you messaged me, I was like, yeah, this is like, I'm on the same wavelength. Like, I'm fascinated by every walk of life. So I'm, count me in.
Yeah. So, I'm trying to think of something intelligent to ask now. So you do like a lot of street photography kind of stuff on your Instagram. I'll see that a lot. So
I try.
Do you ever think about doing, kind of like, you talked about like photojournalism sort of thing and just like getting a short story from those people?
Yeah, I've definitely done that. I mean, I've stopped people, usually not for, oh, hi. Oh, one more hug. Okay, sorry, we gotta have a small hug break.
Okay.
Hi, honey.
1 minute.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more than 1 minute, but soon.
What is that?
What? Oh, it's a microphone.
Oh.
You can play with it after. Deal?
What does it do though?
It's for your voice.
Oh.
I'll show you a little bit. I'm so sorry. I forgot what you asked. Something about street photography.
Yeah, I was asking, like, have you ever wanted to incorporate, your sort of drive for like photojournalism into your street photography?
Yeah. Got it. Yes. Yeah. There's, I don't know if it's still going, but there was like a very popular account probably like 10 years ago called Humans of New York. And it was a guy who would just take pictures of people on the street and then like get their full story and write it in the caption on Instagram. And I always loved that, that premise, and did very similar things, more as like, sort of, sound stories. It's like, this is again going back to like multimedia of 2012 or something like that, but we would do these things called sound stories where you'd like have images as sort of a slideshow over audio documentary. And I've always loved that form. I definitely did that a lot, and sometimes still do it, but it's everything in my life now is just time permitting. So kind of, it just flexes to what I have capacity to achieve at that time, or at the moment, but I always try to bring that whether I document it or not. I almost always, when I shoot people on the street, if I have the opportunity to talk to them, I pretty much always will. And actually my last video that I just posted today, the Rico GR, at the very end is just me talking to a stranger in San Francisco because they saw me with the GR, and I was like, all right, tell me what your thoughts are on this camera. I love those interactions.
Yeah. And it is funny, you talking about that. I had that little, pocket point and shoot camera. And I went, it was the artwork in Fort Worth. Me and my girlfriend just happened to be there at the time it was happening. And this lady came up and like thought it must be like some new thing, even though it's, a 16-year-old camera.
I'm always like delighted. People always see me at like because I'm like a total soccer mom now. I go to the soccer games with my really old cameras and a crazy like zoom lens. And they're like, ooh, did that just come out? I was like, no, it's from 2010. So. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it is kind of funny, like the tech we've forgotten. Like I'm like the only guy who has a Pinterest, and all my stuff is just tech from the 2000s. And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember my friend having that. I remember.
Oh, you gotta send me that board.
Yeah, it's more just awesome. what their algorithm sends me. It goes between right. Hand-forged knives and tools to some weird recipe from the 70s and, early 2000s technology.
Amazing.
But I guess if there was something you were would want to do that wasn't camera related, what would that be?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I love to write, and I don't do it very much. I'm actually taking a very sort of intentional approach to trying to get back into it right now, but I do love to write. I love music. I have a lot of interests that just, I kind of am able to channel through YouTube somewhat, like just, scratching the surface. But I love making selections for music for the videos. And I love, roughly the editing process and, all that sort of stuff. So if it wasn't camera specific, I think I would still, I am signing myself up to learn piano this year. So, all those kinds of, I need to have an outlet no matter what. So if it's not going to be cameras, something will definitely pop into the realm. And I have also a very short attention span. So who knows how long it would take for me to move on to the next thing. But I've always loved music and I've always loved writing. So I think those are two bankable
I think
options.
I found a kindred spirit, the wanting to get into everything and having a short attention span. Well, I guess I've ran out of good questions. So is there anything...
Oh, these were great questions.
Thank you. Is there anything you'd like to leave this interview with?
Just that I appreciate you reaching out. It's always really fun. Like I said, I think it's so cool, all the things that I just like meeting makers, and I like what you're making, and I like your approach to it's very sort of reminded me of that first channel where it's like clearly your interests are driving you down these conversation alleys, and I'm very honored to be part of that. So thanks for the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. And go check out Allie's channel, 1 month, 2 cameras. It's great, even if you aren't particularly interested in cameras, she will make you interested in them. Maybe you'll be like me.
Apologies in advance.
Go onto eBay and be like, okay, I can spend $30 right now. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Awesome. It's kind of like that video we just watched, huh? Go ahead and like and subscribe and share it if you like it. If you didn't get it. It's a free country.